Pillar 2, buildings. Buildings use the most energy, a third of the energy, a third of the CO2. Buildings are the solutions. We have 191 million buildings in the European Union, and the idea is to transform every single one of those buildings in the next 30 years to a mini power plant that will actually collect the distributed energy around the building, solar off the roof, vertical winds on the walls, heat under the ground. 191 million mini power plants. The new buildings in Europe that are coming up are positive power. Acciona has the first zero-emission building in Spain. The great construction company Bouygues has an office complex just came up in Paris that produces more energy than it needs and can send it back to the grid. Pillar 2 is going to start a construction boom so that we can create thousands of businesses and millions of jobs to convert 191 million buildings into mini power plants. Pillar 3, we face the problem of storage because in Norway, like elsewhere, the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing, or sometimes blowing at the wrong time. We're going to use internet technology, and we're going to take the power grid of Europe. It's going to cost €1 trillion between now and 2020 alone. And we're going to turn that power grid into an intergrid that acts exactly like the internet. So that when millions of buildings are collecting energy on site, locally, storing it in hydrogen like they store digital and media, what surplus they don't need, they can share peer-to-peer across the entire European continent. Pillar 5, public transport, private transport, electric plug-in vehicles, fuel cell vehicles are coming online, plug-in vehicles next year. You'll be able to power up on your buildings and then plug in on the grid. This is what we call distributed capitalism, power to the people, and it creates biosphere consciousness. When all of us are responsible for that part of the biosphere where we organize our energy, but then we realize we share that energy across continents with each other, we become aware that we are as connected in the energy flows and the ecosystems of the biosphere as we're connected in the social spaces on the internet. If we can begin to create a third industrial revolution, distributed power, and begin to think in terms of biosphere consciousness, that we're each responsible for the energy flows that we share with each other across continents, we can begin to create a sustainable world. Our business community can join with government and civil society, and we can truly replenish this planet and create a peaceful Earth for future generations. Thank you.
We thank you so much, Mr. Rifkin, for this tour d'horizon, for this great overview of energy, climate change, human consciousness, and a new agenda bringing all of these things together. And we also like the European Union platform being presented from Washington, D.C. to Oslo. It shows how the world is changing. Thank you so much. You have enriched our debate and how we will continue. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Could I invite now Mr. Bonnevik, Mr. Dalvik, and Mr. Gupta to join me in the panel. Is there a Nordic model for all of this, which is a good business relations, relations between employees, employers, and also social corporate responsibility, or is it really a myth? And then secondly, why are some companies succeeding in furthering this agenda and some not? Could I ask you first, former Prime Minister Bonnevik, you are now the president of the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights. You were the CEO of this country for 8 years or more. Is there a Nordic model? And if so, in what does it consist?
Yes, I think it's right to say that to some extent there is a Nordic model. But of course, values we like, and ethical values we like to emphasize, to be implemented, also are to some extent implemented in other countries. So we should not overestimate the exclusivity of the Nordic model. But let me mention some few criteria. And I think especially that the combination of these criteria altogether make what we can call a Nordic model. I think, for instance, about that our Nordic societies, they are rather egalitarian societies, not so big differences between rich and poor and between the different groups. I think that's good. Another criteria is that we have rather strong civil societies in the Nordic countries. Many non-governmental organizations, and some of them also acting more or less like watchdogs towards the business life. Encourage them to follow ethical guidelines, and that is good. I think a third criteria is that our Nordic countries are rather well developed regarding equality between men and women in politics, but also in society as a whole. And fourth, we have a rather advanced social security system. That is also part of what we can call a Nordic model. And finally, I will mention now that we have a very well-developed cooperation between the associations of the employers, the employees, and the state and the government. And we know that the state is rather strong also in Norway, also in that regard. So I think such criteria like this altogether develop what we can call a Nordic model. And these are also good ethical guidelines to follow for business people. I will come back to that.
Interesting. I like when you say the state is rather strong in this country. And many would agree that it is at least rather strong. Anders Dalvik, you were the CEO of Worldwide IKEA, a hugely successful global company that originated from Sweden. I'm sure you've heard the question many times. Is there a Swedish management style? Did your Swedish origins shape you as a global company, or is this all just a myth?
Yes, I get this question very often, that's true. And I often say that I think there are some ingredients of leadership that I think has a Nordic flavor, if you like, and that is consensus building. It is, how shall I put it, the lack of, it's an egalitarian leadership model. People do feel that they can question what managers and leaders say, and in a different way that I'm used to when I look at leadership in other countries that I've been to. Sometimes this leadership style gets criticized for being too consensual and that we never arrive to any decisions and everyone has a say. But overall, I think it has helped, at least the company I've been responsible for, with a very challenging style where co-workers and members of staff and managers at different levels always feel that they can very openly question decisions that are made from higher up. And through that, we arrive at better decisions. And I think that is, if there's anything in the management and leadership styles of Nordic countries, that would be the thing that I think is the clearest one.
Would you say that your very clear profile of social corporate responsibility in IKEA was helped by that internal model of people being able to question all sorts of things? Because I remember days when you were not necessarily, first and foremost, many years back, associated with that.
No, that's true. I think the social and ethical part of IKEA, or that where we have been seen as being very social and ethical, comes from two fundamental things. One is a very strong foundation of a vision and value system. And it's a vision with a social ambition. And I think that is something for any business who wants to be successful, both in the business sense and also from a social ethical sense. The guiding vision of the company has to have a social ambition and not just be to maximize shareholders' wealth or being the best or the leader or some other fancy words. In the IKEA case, the vision is to contribute to a better everyday life for the many people. And that is a very strong social vision that has been guiding our company since 1976 when it was formulated. Okay. And the social ambition then to help the many people is that we should provide home furnishing of good design quality at prices so low that the majority of people can afford them. So people with limited financial means should be able to do this. And I think that has been extremely strong founding principle of IKEA and has been guiding the decision-making within the company throughout the years. It has kind of, it's built into the whole financial model of how the company works. Everything we do at IKEA is steered towards finding ways to reduce the sales price to the customers and thus make it more affordable to people. Through the lower prices, we get the volumes, and through low cost, we get the bottom line. So the financial model is not to maximize the margins, like many companies do. It is to maximize volumes and low cost, and through that, good profits with low prices. So the vision and the financial model is totally, there's a total fit. And then the value system as such, which is very deeply rooted and very strong within the company. And the value system is not built only on things that guides the company towards serving the customer better. It's also very fundamental values that I think are the motivators of many, many people, like honesty, integrity, respect, those type of values. And I think it's important that a value system in any company need to have ingredients that, you know, basically motivates people and are very close to them, not only what's good for the business. And IKEA has these factors. And those two, to sum this up, in connection with a strong, committed owner with long-term perspective, I think are the three maybe reasons why IKEA has the profile and the success it has.
Is there a Nordic model, and if so, what's its strength and what's its weakness?
Well, let me make a couple of observations. Firstly, I lived here 6 years, and those was some of the best years of my life. And I must say, this is an absolutely wonderful environment to live and work in, and it gets reflected in all the measures of quality of life ratings you can get around the world. So I very much agree with the Prime Minister on the description of some of the principles he articulated, and if that is the Nordic model, I strongly endorse it because I couldn't disagree with any of the premises you articulated. They are wonderful and terrific. The challenge, I think, in some ways, as I roam around the world in sub-Saharan Africa or India or China or places like that, is how do you translate that into scale that is so large, and where it's coming from, and where the resources, I know even within the Nordic model there are differences in terms of resource base, let's say Norway compared to some others in terms of just natural resources. But how do you translate this model, if it exists in the Nordic countries and is very successful, I don't disagree with any of the things, into a scale that is relevant for, really the bottom of the pyramid in this world. And that's a huge, huge challenge. It's not an easy problem to think through. It's relatively easy to articulate many of these ideas and principles, but then to put it into practice in environments that I'm talking about is a huge challenge.